So this is the third test, or the third ordeal now, that Yusuf, okay? So after becoming aware of their wives' infatuation with Yusuf, the aristocrats of the city became concerned. It then occurred to them, after they had seen the signs of Yusuf's obvious innocence, that he, Aziz, should certainly imprison him for a time. Okay? In prison, Yusuf would be out of the way of any women who desired him, and not all their wives were involved. Okay? Perhaps they reasoned that it was better to let one innocent person suffer than to tolerate this kind of disturbance in their households. You see? It is said that at this time Yusuf was about 20 years old. Okay? And he was young, still young, and he was a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is evident from the Quran account that he was now a prophet of Allah, according to the tafsirs of Tabari and Ibn Kathir and others, all right? So he was receiving revelations and inspiration from his Lord. Okay? Perhaps these, together with the knowledge that some high destiny awaited him, revealed in his childhood vision and the inspiration he had received in the well. Remember, Allah revealed to him when he was in the well that one day you're going to see your brothers again. See, that inspiration he got, so that was like a sign, alhamdulillah, that prophethood was on him. Okay? Alhamdulillah. Okay? So now that he was in the prison, he reflected upon that. And reflecting upon that, the idea, or reflecting on his previous situation of being in the well, and Allah inspiring him, letting him know that, okay, they threw you in the well, bring harm to you, but one day, you know what I'm saying, you're going to see them again, and you're going to, okay? So he remembered that when he got into prison, subhanAllah. And that was like a solace to him. That kind of like, the commentators say, that kind of like, like cooled him out, like, subhanAllah, instead of being bitter. Can you imagine? What am I in jail for, man? I didn't do anything, you see? You see, so all this is a part of Allah's plan, and so now Allah is grooming him, man. All right? Allah is watching over him, and just letting him know, hey, endure this. Remember I told you in the well, And so he realized now he's a prophet of Allah. So he has to be patient now with this test that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put on him. Now keep in mind also now, like he done had this vision. You know what I'm saying? Told his father that's what's going to happen. So all of that in his mind too. Wow, what does Allah have in store for me? You see? So he had to, now he's a prophet, and so this ultimate vision of success and greatness, however it will be, it's not clear to him exactly what it would be, all right? But he knew it was something great because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had revealed it to him. So they gave him the patience that he needed, to deal with being in prison innocent. Okay? So alhamdulillah, he endured it. And so one of the first things he did once he got in there, alhamdulillah, said, by the will of the all-seeing and the all-knowing, there entered the prison with him 2 young men. Two other young inmates, or fellow inmates, they were in prison too. So according to the various reports, both were servants of the king. And obviously they did something that caused them to go to the prison. All right? One of them was in charge of the drink, of the king's drink, and the other his food. One was his cupbearer, all right, and the other his baker, her cook. So one, used to take his drinking cup and bring his wine and beverages to him, and all right, and one was the cook, the baker, basically. All right? But obviously they did something that caused him to be in prison, all right. But the Quran doesn't mention that, but these were the inmates, okay, and so. They came to Yusuf, and they told Yusuf that they had these dreams. Both of them had dreams. All right? All right? At some point, each of them had a dream which he felt some significance. All right? Observing Yusuf's uprightness and piety, they reported their dreams to him, certain that he would be able to interpret them correctly. So here's what Allah says about that conversation. Allah says, indeed, they said, indeed, they expressed to Yusuf their dream. Indeed, I have seen myself pressing wine. This was the cupbearer, the one who served the king's drink. Okay? And this is in verse 12. Verse 12, Surah Yusuf, which is Surah 12, verse 36. Okay? He said, indeed, I have seen myself pressing wine. That's what he told Yusuf. All right? And the baker, the cook, said, indeed, I have seen myself carrying bread upon my head, from which birds were eating. Okay? And speaking on behalf of himself and his companion, he said to Yusuf, right, inform us of the interpretation of these dreams. We surely perceive you to be among the doers of good. Okay? That's the same ayah. Ayah 36, all in one ayah. Okay? It's amazing. And of course, you would wonder, well, why would they approach Yusuf and ask him to interpret their dreams and whatnot? Okay? And the commentators say, because again, Yusuf had an aura, he had a look, he had a presence of goodness. That's all. So one would imagine they would say, wow, this guy, he's unique. He's something special. He's good. He seems to be a good person. I don't even believe he's in here for any serious crime at all. Wherein they knew that they were in there for crime. So they perceived right away that he's innocent. He really probably did anything, you know what I'm saying? We don't, even though they didn't know what that was. But they approached him based upon his innocence, what they saw, the goodness in his, again, character, and, all of that, okay? And so Yusuf's reply, as they asked him for that, Yusuf's reply was addressed to both of them. And so here's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, all right, the meaning in English, in the Quran. You will not receive any of the food that is provided for you until I inform you of its interpretations. In other words, the food that's due us as inmates before child time, as we say in the prison, right? Before the lunch or dinner, before your food is brought to you, I will interpret your dream. All right? So in other words, he didn't interpret the dream right away. He made them wait. He put them on wait. All right? All right? Some of the commentators say Yusuf, knew, one of the person's, dream was going to be a good outcome, and the other person's dream is going to be a bad outcome. So one's going to be released, and go back to the palace, and one's going to be executed. So he didn't want to bring that sad news right away, so he put him on hold for a minute. How powerful, man. Yeah. He put him on hold. Before your next meal comes, I'll interpret the dreams for you. Wow. Okay? And so the first thing that Yusuf did, all right, he said, all right, and before I interpret the dream, I want you to know that what I give to you, what I'm going to say to you about these dreams, and understanding of these dreams, this is from Allah. This ain't no makeup. I ain't, this is guidance from my Lord's revelation from Allah, what I'm going to tell you. All right? So in other words, this is the truth. All right? So before he went in to interpret it, the first thing he did, he started giving, he started giving them dawah. SubhanAllah. All right? And he did this by explaining to them both that he believed that what he did, he said, indeed, he said, I have left, he started giving them dawah. All right. I want y'all to know, I have left alone the religion of the people who do not believe in Allah. I'm not a kafir. Okay? And they are the disbelievers in the hereafter. All right? And I have followed the religion of my fathers, Abraham and Ishaq and Yaqub. Okay, so he's letting them know the religion he's upon. He's not upon whatever religion y'all upon in Egypt here, whatever it is, I ain't a part of that. I'm not part of that disbelieving system. I follow the religion of Abraham and Isaac and Yaqub, okay? So my grandfather and my father. It was not for us to associate anything with Allah. All right? So in other words, we were people who worship Allah alone, and we didn't associate no part with him. Then he added, referring to the fact that he and his forefathers had steadfastly rejected the ascribing of any partner to Allah. So all of, the things that Yusuf really was saying, again, not only was he giving dawah, all right, and telling them about the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but his focus was on Tawheed, all right? And that's the focus of all of the prophets of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that every prophet they came to the nation, they came to the people, worship Allah alone and shun the false gods. All right, so that was the dawah of all of the prophets. So Yusuf stayed in line with that, and that's a lesson for us today too, and whatnot. When we encounter people, and the most important thing that we should always keep in mind, man, how can I invite them to Islam? How can I share the religion of Allah with these people? And what is the starting point of my dawah? What's the starting point? Is to get them to connect with Allah. Get them to believe in Allah alone, and that He's the Creator, He controls everything, and whatnot, and that our purpose in life is to worship Him. You see? So this was the method of the prophets of Allah, the Anbiya, and we see this in these ayahs. All right? Then he goes on, say, that is from Allah, Allah's favor upon us and upon mankind. But most of mankind are two companions of the prison. He continued. It's finally he began to engage him. He's really giving some real sharp down. Okay? He said, are separate lords better, or Allah, the one, the dominant, subhanAllah. He said, so he's trying to reason with them now. All right? He's really giving them down, all right? You worship besides him mere names by which you have named them. Your so-called gods, you and your fathers, for which Allah has sent down no authority. So he's engaging them. You see, is one God or the multiple gods that you're following, following the religion or the way of your forefathers better than the one true God and one true religion? So he's trying to reason with them to get them to think, wow, yeah, you got a point. You see what I'm saying? So he's really giving some real good dawah, alhamdulillah. He then called their attention to the fact that it is for Allah alone to declare what is real and true, what is fake and what is false, saying, the authority is only for Allah. He has commanded that you worship no one but Him, and that is the correct religion, but most of mankind do not know. So you see, so he's still on this, giving dawah. Keep this in mind when we think about the prophet Yusuf in this story. This is a great lesson for us. He was down, being tested in prison, right? Being innocent, he didn't despair. He stepped forward and stayed right on top of his mission. The most important thing, because he knew that the help of Allah and the support of Allah will come as long as he stand up with his faith and defend the faith and call people to that faith. So it's a lesson for us. No matter how down you are, you're going down. No matter how bad the situation is, all right? Remember Allah. Call to Allah. And as I was reading this, going over this morning, I thought about the Prophet ﷺ. All right? Like when the Prophet ﷺ, we have another excellent example of the Prophet ﷺ, when he came from Taif. Remember Taif? When to Taif and they stoned him? Oh man, that was a horrible situation. They stoned him so bad that blood, was all in his shoes. His shoes and sandals were soaking wet with blood. And they stoned him. And Allah sent Jibreel and told Jibreel, look, the Prophet ﷺ and saw, and the Prophet was in distress. Because he went all throughout the city giving dawah, talking to the people and all of that, man. For many, many days. And then they just rejected him and then they stoned him. They ran him out of the city. Pelting him with stones and he began to bleed. You see? So Allah sent Jibreel, after they ran him out of this, after he got a distance away from the city, Jibreel came and said, Lord, when the Prophet made the dua, Allah, subhanAllah, he prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, You know what I'm saying? He just wanted to make sure that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wasn't displeased with him. As long as you ain't displeased with me, Allah, then I'm okay. I'm okay. I can deal with this test. You see? So that was very difficult for the Prophet. Because Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, she asked him, what was the most difficult time of your in your life, as a prophet, and giving it that? What was the most difficult test for you? And the Prophet mentioned that. He didn't mention the war, the Battle of Badr, the Battle of Uhud, and all. He mentioned Taif, man. All right. So Allah sent Jibril told the Prophet, look, Allah heard your prayer. And right now, the angels of the mountain are just waiting for you to give the command, and we'll bring these mountains down on these people. We'll destroy all of them. All right. And so I'm sure you're familiar with this story. So alhamdulillah, of course the Prophet said, no, the future, their progeny, I pray that their progeny will become believers, which they did later on. But here's the point I want to make. At this difficult time, this difficult test, that the Prophet said was the hardest test in his entire prophetic career, if you will. His entire prophetic mission, which was 23 years, of giving it down. This was the hardest one. And whatnot. Even at that point, you know what I'm saying? Two of the Quraysh sent, they saw the Prophet's condition and him being beat up and bleeding. So they sent a servant of theirs. All right? Adas, that's his name. His name was Adas, right? Sent him, with some fruit, to quench his thirst, give him something, to quench his thirst, some water and some fruit. And so they came, And then so they brought it to the Prophet ﷺ, and so the Prophet, in that state now, so he began to eat. He began to eat. So before he began to eat the fruit that they gave him, he said, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So Adas said, wow, some strange words, some nice words. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, most merciful. Where did you get those words from? And the Prophet ﷺ said, from Allah, I'm a prophet of Allah. So he had this dialogue. So he asked, where are you from? He said, I'm from Nineveh. Oh, Nineveh, you're from the town of the prophet Yunus. Yunus, my brother prophet. So Adas said, how you know about Yunus? He said, I'm a prophet of Allah too. SubhanAllah, you see? Okay. So the prophet, again, the whole point is, even in this time, the prophet took time to remember Allah in this way. You see, and share Islam with Adas. SubhanAllah. At a time when he was down. At a time when he was at his worst state, man, of distress. You see what I'm saying? He still had time to engage him, Oh, you're from Nineveh. Oh, I know about you. And we're both prophets. And so again, the dawah. And guess what? Adas said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. So he embraced Islam at the hand of the Prophet sallallahu. And so again, the lesson that we have in Yusuf and the Prophet, even when they're the prophets of Allah, even when they're down, all right, they're at their lowest in terms of persecution or being opposed, alhamdulillah, it doesn't stop them from giving the dawah. Okay? No matter what tests are upon you, again, you should always engage people in sharing Islam. So he then called their attention to the fact, again, as we mentioned, that the authority is only with Allah, and he has commanded that you worship none but him. That is the correct religion, but most mankind do not. Thus did Yusuf convey to his two prison inmates the message of Allah's oneness and omnipotence, trying with the evidence and arguments granted him by his Lord, to turn them away from idolatry and shirk. For while the two prisoners' dreams concerned their fate during this temporary life, what they had just heard from Yusuf alayhi salam, perhaps for the very first time in their lives, was critical to their final destiny in the life to come. See, that was more important. And so the Prophet Yusuf had to get that off. He had to get that message. So now I can interpret. Give them down. Now give them, then after having conveyed the most important principle of faith to his prison inmate, and what was the most important principle of faith? Tawheed. Everybody said it. Tawheed, man, to worship Allah alone. and don't ascribe no polish to him. See, that's the central point of our religion, alhamdulillah, and all of the prophets, alhamdulillah. So Yusuf got that off. Okay? He got that off. So then after conveying most of the important principles of faith, all right, and you address the matter of their dreams. So he said, O two companions of the prison, he said to the first one of the two, as for one of you, he will give drink to his master, the king. You will continue to be the cupbearer of to the king, and you'll be his wine carrier and all that. But he drank wine back then, and you would continue to have that job, okay, taking care of the drink of the king. He then turned to the second, saying, and as for the other, he will be crucified. Oh, that's hard news. And the birds will eat from his head. So we can't even imagine how that particular inmate felt. All right, his fellow prisoner felt, but he felt satisfied. Yusuf, of course, because he done gave them the dawah, try to connect them with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's in Allah. And then he said, and to convince the man that his fate was unchangeable. Ain't nothing you can do about this. And sealed, his fate is unchangeable, and his fate is sealed. Meaning, in other words, you're going to be executed. All right? All right? And that he must now come to terms with it. You got to come to terms with it. All right? And prepare for the meeting with Allah. SubhanAllah. Okay? Prepare your meeting with Allah. He said, the matter about which you both inquire has been decreed. It's a qadr of Allah. It's going to be. So one going to go back to the palace and serve the king. You'll be in his wine barrel, right? And one of you going to be executed. All right? But the thing, you got to prepare for this decree of Allah, so you got to prepare for it, man. Prepare, So he's still giving dawah. And he said to the one whom he supposed would be saved, mention me before your master. Don't forget me when you get out of prison, you get free, put in a good word for me. Let them know I'm still in prison. I'm innocent. I ain't did anything. Don't just leave me here. Because again, the king has the authority to remove him. Okay? And the king, of course, we're not talking about the Aziz. Okay, we're talking about the king now. Okay, right. All right. And so he said, look, mention me to the king. And the king can pull me up out of here. All right now. And it is said, some of the commentators, at this point, he been in prison about 7 years. It's amazing. 7 years, that's a long time. Okay, all right. So in due course, the man was released from prison, as Yusuf had foretold, but as Allah will, Shaitan caused him to forget the mention of Yusuf to his master. And so he remained in the prison for a few more years. It is said that Yusuf's prison term lasted altogether 7 years, so that by the time he was released, he was around 30 years old. Okay. So his fellow inmate forgot. It reminds you sometime, and anybody have ever had any experience of being in the joint, your man is going home, and, yo, man, make sure you go by my house, and make sure you check out this for me, and make sure you send me some money, and boo, and how many, they get out, right? And those who had that experience know they don't do nothing for you. They get out and they just run crazy. You know what I'm saying? It's real. So here, the wine bearer, the cup bearer of the king, he's so happy and excited to get out. He got all about you.
Yeah. You got their life.
But that's typical. That's how people do, man. They do you like that, okay? Alhamdulillah.
That's true.
Alhamdulillah. So now we come to the scene where Yusuf was delivered from prison, but under the most unexpected circumstances. The king of Egypt had a dream. Perplexed as to its meaning, he related it to his chief advisors, to his ministers. And he said, and this is the Quran, ayat, Surah Yusuf, verse 43, indeed I saw 7 fat cows being eaten by 7 lean ones, and 7 green ears of grain, and others dry. He said, adding, O nobles, explain my dream to me if you are able to interpret the dreams. That's what the king says. Okay? So he has a dream, again, 7 fat cows being eaten up by 7 lean cows. And 7 ears of corn, grain, and other ears dry. I didn't mention a number. So he asked him to interpret the dream. But the high-ranking officials around the king were as puzzled as he was. A mixture of false dreams, they declared, adding. All right? It seemed like a mixture of false dreams here. And we are not knowledgeable about the interpretation of dreams. Now, Yusuf's former prison mate, the one of the 2 who was saved, had for some time been the king's cupbearer. When he heard about his king's dream, he recalled the man who had correctly interpreted his own dream years earlier in prison. So now you remember Yusuf. All right? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, I shall inform you of its interpretation. He volunteered. Therefore, send me forth. I can get the interpretation for me. Let me go back to the prison. This is some years later, okay? He tells the king that. The cupbearer returns to his former prison. He goes to visit Yusuf now in the prison. He found there the one he sought and addressed him with the respect that he realized was due to him. All right? Yusuf, O you truthful one, he said, inform us of the meaning of 7 fat cows eaten by 7 lean ones, and 7 green ears and others dry, so that I may return to the people of the court, the king and so forth, that they may know. So obviously he lets Yusuf know that the king had a dream, and I need you to interpret this dream for me, so forth and so on. All right? And the last words are understood as meaning so that the king and others who were concerned in the matter might know Yusuf's true worth and the error of keeping him unjustly in prison. Then from the springs of wisdom and knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala poured into Yusuf's pure heart, he disclosed to the cupbearer the meaning of the king's dream. Now you notice there's nothing in the Quran where Allah, mentions in this story that Yusuf had an attitude. Can you imagine? No. The first thing you would say, right, when you're, yo, man, you forgot all about it. Now you come to me, you want me to interpret. Right? Follow Allah. But Yusuf didn't do that. Inshallah. It was focused. You see? Perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala let them know, hey, this is going to be a means, you're going to come up out of there. Wow. So Allah knows, because he's the prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's much more noble than, he's not petty like that. No. And you're supposed to do such and such, you didn't do such and such. So he didn't reprimand the guy at all. All right? So he goes on to interpret the dream. He said, you will plant for 7 years consecutively, he said, speaking as one who sees with the eye of certainty that what lies ahead. And what you harvest, leave it in its sheaves, except a little. So put some of it away, store your stuff away, and take what you need to eat, a little, okay? From which you will eat. Then after that will come 7 hard years. See, that's why you got to store stuff, because the famine is going to come. So 7 hard years will come, all right? So forth and so on, all right? And then after that will come a year in which the people will have rain, and in which they will press, the oil and the wine, so forth and so on. All right. So he interprets the dream, letting them know, you understand, that he should, that a famine is going to come. All right. Famine is going to come. So therefore, you should store your food for X amount of years. Just take what you need to eat, and then Allah will send the rain, and then the crops will. And you will harvest, so forth and so on, basically, alhamdulillah, all right? And so you will plant for 7 years what you harvest, all right? And save, but also you eat a little. In 7 years, again, when you will be able to, then 7 hard years of famine will come, all right? Which will consume what you have stored, except a little, so it's going to be a difficult time, all right? Then will come a year of rain that will replenish things, and you will have, you will have abundance, basically. Okay, alhamdulillah. So he interprets the dream. He goes back to the king and lets the king know what the dream is. Okay. Long story short, the king want to know, well, wait a minute, man, who is this guy? Send him to me. Okay. So thus did Allah says in verses 56 and 57, thus did we establish Yusuf in the land to settle therein wherever he will. We touch with our mercy whomsoever we will, and we do not permit the reward of the doers of good to be lost. Wow. And the reward of the hereafter is better for those who believe and are mindful of Allah. So the cupbearer returned to the king with these tidings, and perhaps he added his own thoughts about the extraordinary man who had formerly been his his fellow inmate. In any case, the king was impressed with what he had heard, and he said, bring him to me. Okay? Bring him out of the prison. Okay? But Yusuf's response when the king's messenger came to release him from prison was not at all what the king had expected. Return to your master, he told the guy, go back to your king, and Yusuf instructed him and asked him what is the case of the women who cut their hands. What's happening with the women, man? That was a cause on the prison. What's happening with them? All right? Indeed, my Lord is knowing of their scheme. All right? Now, why would Yusuf have responded in such a manner to the offer of freedom from the king? But basically, he wanted to make sure there wasn't no more fitna, and that his honor, alhamdulillah, was still there, alhamdulillah. Okay? So Yusuf needed an assurance that if he left prison, he would not continue to be harassed. All right? By the highly placed women of the city and by Zuleika in particular. So this is according to the tafsir. Right? Even if one or both of these conditions were not met, he preferred remaining in prison, terrible though it was, to regaining his freedom. Okay, so he wanted to make sure everything is clear, that he's innocent. Alhamdulillah, okay. Yusuf's words asked him what is the case of the women who cut their hand, shows his unwillingness out of the nobility of his nature to single out and implicate his former mistress. All right? They also show his awareness that the king was thoroughly familiar with what had occurred in the years earlier. The king's response to Yusuf's request in turn makes it clear that he was aware of Yusuf's story, for he summoned the high society ladies, he summoned them who had been involved in the matter and began to question them. What was your affair when you sought to seduce Yusuf? He asked. The women's response was immediate and spontaneous. How perfect is Allah, they exclaimed. We know nothing of evil concerning him. So they bore witness. Right? Yusuf's former mistress, his mistress, the wife of the Aziz, Zuleika, then added her testimony to theirs. Now the truth has become evident, she said, and being eloquent witness to Yusuf's truthful and innocence, she openly admitted her guilt, saying, it was I who sought to seduce him, and indeed he is of the truthful. So he wanted to make it clear, alhamdulillah, that he had no intention of doing anything, any of those women, whatnot. But things, the women were after him, but maybe he was after them too. He want to make it very, very clear to everybody. Say, I'm innocent and free of any of this here, this fitna that these women brought, okay? So the king's messenger then returned to Yusuf in prison and informed him of the women's response, and Yusuf made a statement of his purpose in having brought up the matter after so many years. And that is that his request that the king would clear the matter of the women is so that he, his former master, the Aziz, okay, will know that I did not betray him in secret, see, integrity, and that Allah does not guide the scheming of the betrayers. And so Yusuf wanted to vindicate and exonerate himself from any kind of guilt of that situation whatsoever.
Oh.
Nor do I absolve myself. And he continued, check this out. Indeed, the nafs is a persistent enjoiner of evil. Except as my Lord shows mercy, indeed, my Lord is forgiving and merciful. These words reveal the tremendous purity and integrity of Yusuf's character. Although he was a prophet, and we mentioned this before, protected by Allah from shaitan and the desires, he did not hesitate to admit publicly, see, that he too could be subject to temptation. Women were beautiful, yeah. One of the nafs, the devil, your desires, yeah. You see what I'm saying? So these desires went to my head too, like anybody else. So this is a teaching lesson for us. This is a prophet, this is what he's saying, alayhi salam. All right? And he pointed out an essential fact for all mankind to take note of, that the nafs, the desires, one's lower desires, always, without exception, incites or urges or commands us to do evil. Evil desires, the evil thoughts that we all. And the Prophet ﷺ, he told them, as long as you don't act on those thoughts, those evil thoughts, you know what I'm saying? He said, that is faith. See? That is iman. That's real faith. You see? When you have those desires and you, and you refrain, because you know better. You know Allah is watching. You know? The human being is weak. All of us, subhanAllah, all of us prone to have evil thoughts. Everyone, without exception. It's when you carry them out, you see, or when you dwell on them. If you have evil thoughts, you don't dwell on evil thoughts. When you dwell on evil thoughts, well, you may be inclined to it. When they hit your mind, like, you know, shaitan, like the Prophet says, shaitan runs through your body like your blood, right? Okay? You know, so at that moment, you know, when those things happen, how do billahi min shaitan rajim. And so the Prophet said he would seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He seek the forgiveness of Allah, repent to Allah. You know, 100 times a day, one narration. Another narration, he says 70 times. You see, because man is prone, you know, the devil, the nafs, all of these things. Right? So Yusuf mentioned that, you know, okay? And it was not for the mercy of Allah. See, if it was not for the mercy of Allah on me, I'd have submitted. So even when you are able to say, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem," when you're able to turn away and run away from the bad, you don't walk away from it and say, "I'm tough. My faith is solid." No, you don't do that, right? You know what do you say? You what? You thank Allah. You recognize that Allah turned your way, and you recognize if it wasn't for Allah, man, you'd have been jammed. You'd have been messed up. All right, you would have fallen into sin. So we should always be grateful. All right? And that's the example we get from Yusuf. Okay, so this is a very vital piece of information, because unless we are aware of this fact, we will not be able to understand, much less control the desires and demands of our lower desires. Armed with this knowledge, however, we can understand its tricks and traps and take measures to control it, aligning oneself with Allah against it, even though it is part of ourselves, you see. So you got to be connected with Allah. So Yusuf's honor and integrity had now been vindicated by the very person who had originally accused him, and on whose account he had been imprisoned. Perhaps the king was now even more impressed with Yusuf and eager to have him by his side. Again, he sent for him, instructing his messenger, "Bring him to me. I shall appoint him exclusively for myself." And this time the messenger returned with Yusuf newly freed. And when the king had spoken to him, he decided to appoint him to a high office, saying, "Surely you are this day established and trusted in our presence." So he brought him out of prison, man, right?
Yeah.
and gave him a high position. Can you imagine this? Gave him a high position, man. You next to me. You're the vice minister. You're the vice president. Wow. It's amazing. From the prison. Wow. Okay. Then, directed and guided by his Lord, Yusuf made a request of the king. Yusuf said, all right, now you made me the vice minister. Appoint me over the storehouses of the land. And he said, indeed, I will be a knowledgeable guardian, meaning it is said one who knows how to gather and store and make the best use of the stocks of grain of the land. And the king granted his request. Thus it was that Yusuf became the chief minister of Egypt. Wow. Bearing the title of El-Aziz. So he had the title El-Aziz, the exalted one. It is said that he was the highest official in the land after the king himself. As such, Yusuf proclaimed his Lord's message and established a just law based on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's commands. In addition to this, he stored up the country's grain during the first 7 years of plenty, except that a portion that the people ate. And we stop there, inshallah. We will continue, inshallah. Subhanaka wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.